Walking down the quiet hallways of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Elizabeth Wilson was heading to prepare for the display of a newly arrived Renaissance painting. At 32, she had already established herself as a respected curator, and her steps carried her usual confidence. Though her annual salary of $80,000 was modest compared to her husband's income, for her, it represented pride and independence. That morning, she had received news of another failed egg retrieval at the NYU Fertility Center. 4 years of fertility treatments. This fact weighed heavily on her heart. Egg retrieval, IVF, implantation. Through the repeated cycles of treatment, she had swung between hope and despair. Maybe next time. The screen of her cell phone displayed this terse reply from her husband, James. Married for 6 years, James, who came from a prestigious Boston family, was initially a kind and warm husband. However, since the fertility treatments began, his attitude had gradually changed. Now she could sense cold indifference. As a hedge fund manager earning $2 million annually, he had lately begun avoiding any discussion of fertility treatments entirely. Their residence in a luxury apartment building on East 76th Street in the Upper East Side was a perfect space that looked like it had been cut out of a magazine. However, within that perfection, there seemed to be a lack of human warmth. On the living room table sat an expensive flower arrangement sent by her sister Rachel. The attached card bore the logo of her favorite brand. With 500,000 Instagram followers, she always attracted attention with her glamorous posts. "Hey, sis, how about dinner at Le Bernardin? My followers seem interested." Elizabeth sighed deeply as she typed a reply on her smartphone. Her sister, who lived in the family's guest house, had become a darling of high society. However, behind her glamorous exterior, she made no attempt to hide her constant yearning for an even more luxurious lifestyle. Her boyfriend, Marcus Johnson, was a talented African-American musician. His income as a street musician in a corner of Brooklyn was unstable and far from enough to satisfy Rachel's expensive tastes. Their conservative parents showed clear disapproval of Rachel's choice of partner. Their father, a retired investor, and their mother, a pillar of society, held strict standards for their daughters' marriage partners. In that sense, Elizabeth's marriage should have been their pride. As the evening bells of St. Patrick's Cathedral rang out, Elizabeth stood by the window, gazing at the view of Central Park. Tomorrow she had important exhibition preparations. As the person responsible for transporting a Renaissance masterpiece, she needed to do a perfect job. While storing organic vegetables from Whole Foods in the refrigerator, Elizabeth was mentally organizing tomorrow's schedule. Her weekly prayers at church had lately become her only source of peace. One day, Elizabeth was doing a final check of the packaging condition of a precious Renaissance painting in the back of the transport vehicle. The delivery of this artwork, which was to become the Metropolitan Museum's flagship exhibition, was an important project for her. She paid attention to every detail, trying to forget that morning's failure at the NYU Fertility Center. "Ms. Wilson, it's time for departure." Nodding at the driver's voice, she signed the final verification documents. The sound of wipers clearing away the rain strangely grated on her nerves. A sound that normally wouldn't bother her seemed unusually irritating today. It happened in an instant. A truck suddenly appeared from the front, drastically veering from its path into their lane. Whether it had slid on the wet road surface or due to driver negligence, despite the driver's desperate attempt to control the wheel, the collision was unavoidable. With a violent impact, the world spun. The sound of metal creaking, glass shattering, and someone's scream. In a sensation where everything seemed to be happening far away, Elizabeth's consciousness sank into darkness. When she opened her eyes, Elizabeth was lying in a bed at Lenox Hill Hospital. Staring at the white ceiling permeated with the smell of disinfectant, she tried to grasp the situation. According to the doctor's explanation, she had broken 3 ribs and suffered a serious concussion. While the facial abrasions were minor, she had also sustained internal bruising, requiring at least 3 weeks of hospitalization. The important artwork. Those were her first words. Her sense of responsibility as a curator crossed her mind before her own pain. Fortunately, thanks to its special protective case, the painting was unharmed. However, her body and mind would need a long healing process. James appeared in the hospital room 6 hours after the accident. He was dressed in an expensive suit, maintaining his usual perfect appearance. However, his eyes showed no concern for his wife. Insurance papers. Those were his first words. He mechanically spread out the documents and asked for signatures where needed. He showed almost no interest in Elizabeth's expression of pain. Glancing repeatedly at his luxury watch, his desire to finish the business quickly was obvious. He came the next day too. However, it was just a brief visit where he continuously made work calls on his cell phone. Elizabeth watched his back as he left after just 15 minutes, through her fading consciousness. From the 3rd day on, he stopped showing up altogether. On the afternoon of the 5th day of hospitalization, the hospital room door opened. The hospital's visiting hours ending announcement leaked into the hallway, echoing in the quiet space. "How are you?" It was Rachel. Dressed in the latest Chanel collection dress and carrying an expensive Hermès bag. There was an uneasy tension in her expression. Beneath her perfect makeup, her lips could be seen trembling slightly. "Actually, I have something to tell you." Her sister sat in the expensive floral-patterned sofa and looked straight at Elizabeth. The twilight light streaming through the hospital window eerily illuminated her profile. "I'm pregnant." Elizabeth's heart felt like it stopped for a moment. The monitor's sound seemed to fade away. "The father is James." Those words froze the air in the hospital room. Even the sound of rain outside seemed to stop for a moment. "You don't deserve to have children." "But I could do it." "Easily." Rachel's voice had an almost intoxicated resonance. In her eyes floated the arrogance of a victor. Elizabeth's vision began to blur. Breathing became difficult. Her heart rate soared, and the monitor emitted a warning sound. The room began to spin, and cold sweat trickled down her forehead. The nurse who rushed in dealt with her panic attack while escorting Rachel from the room. The nurse's voice could be heard from far away. A week later, when James appeared in the hospital room again, he had a document in his hand. Outside the window, thunder roared and heavy rain beat against the glass. "Your sister is the woman I truly love," he coldly announced while throwing down divorce papers. The documents scattered across the white bed, falling where Elizabeth couldn't reach them. "We can't have children together, so it's over." Without even glancing at Elizabeth's tears, he left. The sound of his expensive leather shoes echoed down the hallway. That night, her parents called. Her mother's voice had lost its usual warmth. You couldn't make James happy. Her mother's voice was cold. On the other end of the phone, she could hear her father's heavy sigh. On her smartphone screen was Rachel's latest Instagram post. An image of her holding hands with James. Their dinner at the luxury restaurant Le Bernardin. The caption read, "The beginning of a new life." The post had already received tens of thousands of likes. Even after the 3-week hospitalization period ended, there was no one to come pick up Elizabeth. In a motel room in downtown Manhattan, Elizabeth was listening to the report of private investigator Alan Wilson. Beyond the rain-beaten window, neon signs cast their mechanical light. "Mrs. Wilson, let me confirm before we begin the investigation," the seasoned detective said while opening a thick file. "Regarding your sister, Rachel Morrison. A complete analysis of her social media accounts and behavior records for the past 3 years. Plus a thorough investigation of her romantic relationships. Is this correct?" Elizabeth quietly nodded. From the shock she received in the hospital bed, her heart had already regained its composure. This wasn't resignation. It was a quiet determination to find the truth. The fee is $50,000, paid in advance. Elizabeth agreed to the detective's words without hesitation. Though it would consume almost all of her savings, she was convinced it was worth it. The investigation progressed surprisingly quickly. First discovered were Rachel's deleted Instagram posts. Among the data analyzed by a post-recovery specialist lay decisive evidence. Going back to 2021, there are regular posts from specific locations. The detective marked points on a map. A music studio in Brooklyn. The restaurant Blue Note. And a certain luxury hotel along the Hudson River. Elizabeth caught her breath. That was Marcus Johnson's base of operations. Further investigation revealed shocking facts one after another. Rachel and Marcus's relationship had continued for more than 3 years. Hotel reservation records, restaurant security camera footage, and the decisive evidence recorded conversations between the two. "Once we get James's money, we'll be free." Rachel's recorded voice was full of calculation. "But I feel sorry for your sister. Don't be stupid. She doesn't deserve to ruin our happiness." The investigation deepened further. Security cameras at the Upper East Side luxury apartment caught Marcus sneaking in and out late at night. The source of Rachel's lavish shopping funds was also revealed. Not from Marcus, but from James's remittances. "Mrs. Wilson, this is more than just an affair," the detective explained while showing the extensive evidence documents. "This is planned fraud. Your sister was targeting James's fortune from the beginning. And Marcus was complicit in that plan." As time passed, the evidence mounted. Rachel's phone records. Photos of secret meetings with Marcus. Records of transfers from James. Numerous false social media posts. And the most crucial evidence, Rachel's obstetric medical records. The pregnancy dates to last December. And the detective continued, choosing his words carefully. "The fetus shows characteristics of African American heritage." The full truth came into view. It was a meticulously planned marriage fraud. Rachel had intentionally seduced James while pregnant with Marcus's child. The goal was to obtain James's vast fortune and to eliminate Elizabeth, who was an obstacle to their plan. The happiness staged on social media. Clever lies to their parents. Even Elizabeth's accident ended up supporting their plan. Mrs. Wilson, with this much evidence. Interrupting the detective's words, Elizabeth quietly stood up. Outside the window, a summer storm was raging. "Thank you. Now it's my turn." Her voice was filled with strong will. Not revenge or hatred. Just determination to reveal the truth and achieve justice. At that moment, Elizabeth's smartphone rang. It was a message from Rachel. Elizabeth smiled slightly. The time for all truths to be revealed was finally approaching. In September, the heavy doors of the Manhattan Federal District Court opened. Beside Elizabeth sat Jessica Thompson, one of New York State's most highly regarded lawyers. Since her Harvard Law School days, she had continued to defend the rights of women placed in unfair positions. "Our argument is clear." Walking up the steps to the courtroom, Attorney Thompson spoke quietly but forcefully. "The prosecutor has already confirmed all the evidence. Fraud, defamation, and malicious property invasion. Maximum sentencing. Elizabeth, let's make them pay the proper price for trying to steal your life." Elizabeth silently nodded. Her high heels echoed in the marble hallway of the courthouse. The briefcase in her hand contained all the evidence gathered during 3 months of investigation. Its weight strengthened her resolve even further. Entering courtroom 1, James and Rachel were already present. Rachel had been granted temporary leave from the luxury Lenox Hill Hospital to attend this trial. In her arms was a newborn baby. The baby, wrapped in luxury brand baby clothes, clearly showed African American features. All rise. The United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, First Session, is now in session. As the clerk's voice rang out, Judge Sarah Johnson, one of the most trusted judges in family law, entered the courtroom. First, we'll hear the plaintiff's opening statement. The judge's voice broke the silence. Attorney Thompson rose gracefully and approached the jury. Each of her steps filled the courtroom with tension. This case is not merely family discord. Her voice resonated throughout the courtroom. This is planned marriage fraud, an organized crime aimed at financial gain. And above all, it is an unforgivable act that attempted to destroy one woman's life. Evidence appeared one after another on the large screen. First, the deleted social media posts successfully recovered by Wilson and Associates Detective Agency. These contained decisive evidence of Rachel and Marcus's 3-year relationship. Next, security camera footage from luxury hotels like the Plaza Hotel and Four Seasons. The scenes of Rachel and Marcus's secret meetings were shown chronologically. A detailed analysis report by Goldman Sachs financial experts revealed unusual transfer records from James to Rachel. The total exceeded $1 million. Furthermore, conversations recorded at Marcus's Brooklyn studio. "Once we get James's money, we'll be free. We can start a new life in Miami. I'll use anyone as a stepping stone for our happiness." And finally, the most decisive evidence, medical records from NYU Medical Center's obstetrics department, were presented. It is medically clear from genetic characteristics that the father of the fetus is African American. At the testimony of the medical expert from Johns Hopkins University, the courtroom erupted in commotion. The color drained from Rachel's face. James stared blankly at the baby in his arms. Their parents covered their faces in the gallery. Marcus's testimony as a witness made the situation definitive. He was dressed in an expensive suit, but had lost his confidence as a musician. "Yes, Rachel and I had a relationship for 3 years." His voice carried a tone of remorse. "The baby is definitely mine. And this plan was all Rachel's idea." New evidence was presented almost daily. Eyewitness accounts from New York society parties. Testimony from restaurant staff. And detailed testimony about the plan from Rachel's former assistant. The defendants' arguments crumbled one after another. Despite hiring an expensive legal team, James was powerless against the mounting evidence. And soon, the time for judgment arrived. Major media outlets from across the country packed the courtroom. This trial had attracted significant attention as a fraud case that shook Upper East Side society. Defendants Rachel Morrison and James Wilson are found guilty of conspiracy to commit marriage fraud. The judge's verdict was delivered. Divorce granted with no division of assets. Payment of $50 million in damages to Elizabeth. Prison sentence for Rachel for fraud, 5 years. Prison sentence for James for conspiracy, 3 years. After the verdict, its impact was far-reaching. The hedge fund where James worked immediately terminated his contract. Under Wall Street's strict ethical code, his career in finance came to a complete end. His family home in Boston, seeing the gravity of the situation, announced they would sever ties with him. Rachel's Instagram followers plummeted overnight from 500,000 to less than 10,000. Her status as an influencer that she had built up collapsed in an instant. All sponsorship contracts with luxury brands were cancelled. Their parents finally had to accept the truth. "Elizabeth, we're truly sorry." Her father's voice was filled with deep remorse. His expression showed self-reproach for failing to see through his daughter's true intentions, bound by conservative values. In December, in snow-covered Manhattan, Elizabeth signed the contract for a new luxury apartment. From the top floor room facing Park Avenue, she had a panoramic view of Central Park's snow-covered landscape. Her reputation at the Metropolitan Museum had actually improved. Her professional attitude in ensuring the painting's safety even in a crisis situation was highly valued. "Mrs. Wilson, we approve your promotion to head curator. Your salary will also double." Elizabeth quietly nodded at the director's words. And that evening, on her way to Christmas Eve Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral, she happened to meet her new neighbor. He was a cardiac surgeon from Stanford University who smiled at her with sincere eyes. Rachel began serving her sentence in the women's prison. Her glamorous life as an influencer had been reduced to ashes. In the prison visiting room, under fluorescent lights, Rachel in her orange prison uniform had completely lost her former appearance. "The baby will be put in foster care." Her voice was hollow. Their parents refused to raise an African-American grandchild. Marcus had fled to Texas, abandoning any child support payments. 0 followers. All sponsorship contracts cancelled. "My life is." Disowned by her family, she was considering applying for welfare after completing her sentence. It was the lifestyle she had most despised. Meanwhile, James Wilson's fall was equally dramatic. Goldman Sachs's internal memo noted his permanent ban. Wall Street had completely expelled him, branded as a fraudster. His last appearance before incarceration was in a cheap apartment. His Boston family home had completely cut ties with him. His $2 million annual income and elegant Upper East Side lifestyle had vanished like a dream. Marcus's end was also miserable. He continued playing lifeless performances in a cheap Austin bar. While he certainly had talent, his career, tainted by scandal, was now beyond recovery. Social media was flooded with voices condemning him. Elizabeth's life had regained new brilliance. As head curator at the Metropolitan Museum, she led a successful special exhibition titled The Value of Classics in Modern Times. The New York Times praised her comeback as a triumph for the art world. At her new residence on Park Avenue, her relationship with her parents was gradually being restored. "We were wrong," her mother apologized tearfully. They painfully realized their mistake of being trapped by conservative values and losing sight of the truth. And one evening, while jogging in Central Park, Elizabeth met again with David Chan, a cardiac surgeon who had transferred from Stanford University. His sincere gaze and gentle smile made Elizabeth feel something she had long forgotten, the warmth of true affection. At early morning mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral, Elizabeth quietly offered her prayers. There was no longer hatred or sadness there. "God, I understand now." Her prayer was pure. All experiences had their meaning. The morning sun shone through the church's stained glass windows. That light was warm and bright, as if blessing her new life. The baby was growing up healthy with good foster parents. Feelings of forgiveness toward Rachel might come someday. That too, as part of life. Later, the New York Social Diary reported Elizabeth's engagement. "Art world lady who overcame trials finds new love." At the end of the article were these words: "Sometimes life leads us in unexpected directions. But happiness surely comes to those who continue walking with truth and sincerity." Outside the window, the summer sunlight was pouring down.